It was a great experience, and I had transferred from Wenatchee Valley down to Pullman. I had been a math and physics major. I had an electronics background in my life, grew up um, with amateur radio and electronics in my life. When I was 13, I was very, very sick, and I was in the hospital for several months. And in that period of time, I had no visitors, except I had a Zenith transoceanic shortwave radio at the head of my bed. And I laid there every night and listened to the radio. That's all I did. That was my whole connection to the outside world. And I'll never forget, for example, writing a request or a letter to a station at KGA in Spokane. I lived in Wenatchee, and I wrote this letter up to KGA, and I told this guy the story of my life. I said, I'm sick and I'm home, and I would love to hear some music, and if any of your listeners would like to write to me, that would be wonderful. And I got hundreds of letters out of that guy's single reading of my letter. And I think, I have to tell you something, I think the seeds of my interest in and love and value of radio were planted way back then. After I graduated from WSU through absolutely a wonderful gift of another WSU graduate, whose name was Bob Concy, who was an announcer at KGMI in Bellingham and worked at International Good Music in their syndicated music program. And a couple of weeks later, I got a call from Lee Facto, who was the president of that company, and Lee said, Bob Concy says I should interview you, and I said, okay. I went up to Bellingham, and they offered me this job as a field engineer, going around the United States installing automation in broadcast stations, big and small. And that was the greatest job I ever had. It was like getting paid to go to graduate school. And I left and I went back to Wenatchee. And while I was in Wenatchee, just kind of picking up the pieces and figuring where I go from here, the owner of the radio station in Chelan heard me on the air, probably doing news. And I went up, I met with him, and he said, how would you like to come to Chelan? I said, well, that would be fun. What do you have in mind? He said, I'd like to sell you my radio station. And he said, I believe you're the perfect young man to take this station over and run it, and I'll make it work for you. And he did. And I never missed a payment.